both Dr. Tebebe also brought to our attention very valid and profound ideas to this community. On one side, we have seen the Ethiopian history from the roots by Dr. Tebebe, and also we could be able to really realize the Western culture and the second generation identity at the same time by Pastor Nabiyo. Thank you so much for being willing to share us this amazing resource to Ethiopian pastors and churches today. First of all, it's good to really give introduction, especially your background. Dr. Tebebe, we know him for so long. He's a historian, graduated from Michigan University, and also he's a professor there. And as he mentioned earlier, he wrote a book called Evangelical Movement in Ethiopia, 2009. That's a very wonderful book. I also recommend you to read that book. You're gonna gain a lot of information concerning about the Ethiopian history. And Dr. Tebebe, you mentioned a lot of good points. You started from a biblical point. You start from the biblical point, historical background. You mentioned two giant theologians, Thomas Akenu and Ligi Katerli, and also the present theologian Tim Keller, how the social justice play a great role in a Christian circle. So that was your background, that was your foundation, and then you go to deal with the Ethiopian diaspora concept and what is Ethiopian diaspora, and you mentioned about the Western culture. Also, we have to be engaged. The Ethiopian diaspora has to engage with the system of the Western, because we don't know who we are in the Western culture. So the role of the church as well. You point out very good points: systematic injustice and discrimination and police brutality, these all things. And then finally you moved on to explain about who are we. We are Ethiopian, we come from a strong culture, we never colonized, we are politically pressured and immigrated to this country. And then you continue explaining about who are the diaspora. And you said in Amharic language, Gana ustachin algaba. And that's a good point. So you are pushing us to understand what the diaspora means. And so that's the highlight of the day. And you stress more on the social engagement. And then finally, you mentioned the two public engagement role players of the Asian time, Guddina Tumsa and young Ethiopians. And then finally, the core issue you mentioned, what we're gonna do as a diaspora church. And also the diaspora church has to have this vision for the future. And so has to engage and answer this question at the present time. And many times in your presentation, you are saying we have to engage in the culture, and also we have to know our children's from the based on the culture of the Western culture. Through that lens, we have to learn a lot of things. So you mentioned this so many times, and you end up with a new idea called third space. Let's give them to this generation a place to explain themselves, not pressuring them by Ethiopian culture, but let them, live out the life of their own culture. And so these are the main points. And Pastor Nabiyu, also you mentioned a great point. And if I try to summarize that one, we don't have enough time. So it's better to move to ask you a question. But having you here at EECF and on behalf of Pastoral Commission, I would like to say thank you. And when we see you, really, we see hope. We see hope. The coming generation also, move like you. So it's better to let me introduce Nabiyu, because he used to live here in the California area. And I just want to say a few things about him. Nabiyu Lula Kalile is a second generation immigrant to the States. He was born in Ethiopia. However, he, along with his parents, migrated to the state when he was 2 years old. He was to Ato Mesfin and Almaz Kalile. He's grown up in California all his life. Pastor Nabiye was brought up along with his two younger siblings in a Christian house to two parents who loved Jesus. He eventually came to the real saving phase in Jesus while in college. Shortly after becoming a Christian, he answered the call to the ministry with the support and confirmation of his church, community, and pastors. Much of his time in his 20s was spent discipling Ethiopian, Eritrean youth and young adults, leading college campus Bible studies and evangelizing outreaches, entering in the prison ministry, and assisting small groups ministry in his local church. Pastor Nabi met his wife to be Hiwat, one of our members, in the early 20s, and soon married. They been married for 13 years and have 4 children. Amazing. Pastor Nabi and his family currently reside in Dallas, Texas. He's involved in church planting and also church revitalization and youth ministry. Pastor Nabi has been pastoring and preaching for 15 years. Of knowing him, his passion is to know Christ and to make him known. Thank you for being with us today. I really appreciate it. And I have 5 questions for both of you guys. And then the rest of time, I will open up for the workshop members to participate and ask. I'm not gonna get into all of your research presentation, but just a general question, like I'm gonna bring it back down to our present situation. So the first question for both of you, feel free to jump and dive to answer. And the first one is, how is the issue of racism? Of course, you addressed this whole question on your research, but just I'll open up this question for the whole member of the workshop to participate and discuss. How would the issue of racism in the US affecting the diaspora Christian youth community in particular and the church in general? I'll repeat it again. How would the issue of racism in the US affecting the diaspora Christian youth, which means our children, our kids, community in particular, and the church in general? So first, you can, Dr. Tebebe, you can answer, or
unmute yourself, Dr. Tabal.
Unmute you. Unmute. We can't hear you. We can't hear you, Dr. Tabal. Make it unmute. Mano, tunune miyazo technician unmute Marek.
How about now?
Oh yeah, go ahead now.
Okay, I think I have alluded to that. You know, I honestly speaking, prior to this assignment, I was pleasantly or unpleasantly surprised when I interviewed kids who are now college students, you know. They grew up here. I knew them since birth. And except one, you know, we have these technical tabs for for those who grew up here, who were born here, they are given this technical tab called 2, and then for those who came here before 12, they are given this technical tab 1.5. In any case, one of them came here when he was 18. He hesitated to identify himself as a black, and he explained that to me. I wouldn't go into the details, but the rest, I mean, unhesitatingly, all of them said they are blacks. And they said, all through. I said, all through? Yeah, all through. And then the question I had for them is, you know, how could this happen? Their answer was very blunt, all of them. We live in a social universe, in a culture that defines us, not by your little home, Ethiopian home here, not by the injera we eat, not by the little Amharic language you speak, but out there, nobody profiles us as Habesha or as Eritreans or Ethiopians. We are given this name, black. We step into that world, we inhabit that world. So that's how they conceptualize. Now the problem is, I could go on and go on. What is blackness? That's a very tricky question. I don't want to go into that. But our children, they are from Ethiopia, they are immigrants. Even if they share the same disadvantage, the same place, the same stereotypes, the same slurs, innocent or nuanced, as Pastor Nebiyu said, the symbolic, they call it symbolic violence, gestures. Like my own son, let me tell you, he went to college, MSU, residential college, with honor. He wanted to study medicine, so he has to start, you know, he was in this residential class college, physics and mathematics. I think he was the only one in that group, and everybody was asking him, how did you happen? He has never asked this question. I mean, the playing field is equal, although it may be unequal in some cases, because the blacks are disadvantaged. Our kids are very striving. They see we are hard workers. So they absorb that. They go to college with that. But the college screams at them in a very nuanced way. Even their own professors. I have a couple of my you know, the people that I interviewed. In fact, one of them poignantly told me, she was a nurse. She finished, you know, with flying colors. She also took the national exam. And then when she reported that to her instructor, when the rest of the white kids were acknowledged publicly, the professor intentionally, even when she emailed, when she emailed her, intentionally ignored. So they experience this on a daily basis. Let me give you one of my own example. One lady came to my office for a business reason, and she picked my book, and then she just read, you know, a portion of it, and she said, "Oh, you write so well." This is what you call microaggression. She's making a statement. You are not supposed to write. That's what it is. Or let me give another example. One day, I went to my college, you know, what you call cafeteria, and I picked up some soup, and then I forgot to put my spoon. So as I was paying, the cashier said, you are not supposed to take this food without silver. What do you call that? Silver. Silver Manka. Are you with me?
Yes.
Yeah. And now, you know what?
Silverware.
Exactly. And for me, what do you mean by you are not supposed to take this? Oh, you meant without spoon? I forgot this. Sorry. She assumed that I'm ignorant of. In any case, this is how racism. I want to make sure that we are together. Are you hearing me?
Yeah, we're together.
Yeah. This is how racism is, you know?
Yes.
It screams on our kids every day. They feel it from childhood, from kindergartens, all the way to high school. Now, I don't know, to the latter question, you know, how does this affect the church? I have no answer for that.
Okay.
Or how should the church respond to this? I think the leaders need to talk about that.
Great. Thank you so much. Pastor Nabiyu, you can continue right now.
Yeah, I would say in response to the question, I think what we'll discover also in addition is not every Black person's experience with race or race relations is the same. Notice. This goes into a little bit of identity politics, right, as well, where there is something to be said about how certain particular groups may receive the brunt of discrimination or so forth. But you'll run into, I've encountered racism in my life at different points in Sacramento and also where we lived in the Galt area. But by and large, I can also say I've had a positive relationship with people of the opposite demographic. But I can also think of people who've had, unfortunate situations, and that's one thing. And then to add just one more layer, you can have people who have these range of experiences, let's say, with racism in its different forms, but the way they came out of it is different also. You see what I mean? They didn't allow it to go on to shape them in their identity and their future, whereas there are others. So me as a father, as a man, a Black man in America, as a pastor, I know I have no control over eliminating racism in the world and in the country. It's going to always be with us. We can reduce it, and I praise God that America is less racist than it has ever been. And I also praise God for the fact, and a lot of people need to hear this, it's relative to other parts of the world, it's not as racist. A lot of people think this is racism. No. If you go to other places, and Africa or in other places, it's amazing just how much prejudice exists, and it's built into the system. Yes, systemic racism and slavery and so forth existed, and people can talk about to what extent we have that now. When I hear the question as far as how is the issue of racism in the US affecting the diaspora youth, it's not so much the issue of racism, it's the narrative that is going on around the issue. My concern is not so much with the individual cases of racism. My concern is what are you telling yourself about that? What sort of story are you creating and crafting about yourself, about who it was that engaged with it, and about the issue of racism? And what sort of story are you going on to continue to tell yourself? What sort of story are you telling yourselves as family in the family room? Mm-hmm. And what are you telling as pastors to your congregation? You see what I mean? That's important, because you can have an issue of racism and rebound and become resilient and be somebody in the world. But you can have an issue of racism exist somewhere in your life, in your past, and that narrative that attaches itself to that train, could be all the difference in the world as to who you end up becoming. And that is my biggest concern. And you'll see this with a lot of the abolitionists. I have them right now, Frederick Douglass I'm looking at, or you look at Booker T. Washington, or these individuals. I mean, they were living during that time. You look at a lot of these families. How was it that they were able to still experience mobility? How was it that they were able to still be resilient and move forward, keep their families intact, and so forth? There was a narrative that didn't dismiss what took place. It didn't whitewash their experience, but it enabled them to frame their reality and their experience in such a way that they were able to still move forward and push forward. And my concern is that even though it may not be happening right now, that our Abisha black-skinned kids are going to end up telling themselves the same story that blacks here have been telling themselves, that have kept them back. And the reason why up till now, you'll find people who come from Barbados or from Jamaica or from Nigeria or Kenya or any other place who share the same skin color, but because of their culture of you work hard, you don't talk back to your parents, you respect them, you don't forget your family when you turn 18, get out of the house. You're resilient, you push. A lot of these things that you see even in Asian homes, these values that even with brokenness in the world, they manage to still push through. You see, because from a white person, when they look at that black versus this black, they're virtually indistinguishable, right? So they're gonna be profiled. But it's, I think, the element of what's going on in that culture that allows them. You see, my parents wouldn't allow me to pull the victim card. My dad, he was disabled, many of you know. On top of that, he's black. And on top of that, they came late. There were a lot of ways in which they were disadvantaged when we first came. And we had to have that conversation. And he never allowed it to cause him to throw in the towel. He pressed forward. And I think those sort of things were deposited in me that helped me not to dismiss what still exists in its various forms, but to not allow it to define my identity. I end.
Good. Thanks so much. We have youth leaders and children ministry teachers here in this room. So it's better to open up for them also. If anyone is ready to give his idea, I will give you for 2 people to speak. Youth leaders or children ministry. You can share us from your experience. How is the issue of racism in the US affecting the diaspora Christian youth? Is there anyone?
Can I speak?
Sure, go ahead. What's your name?
My name is Ainalam.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I think if we focus on the Bible, and if we focus on Jesus Christ and teaching them the Bible, and also on the side, they will ask, I teach children, and then they have a lot of questions about these issues. And then everything is in the Bible. I take them to the Bible and I teach them. And what I'm saying is, like, what helped me to be confident and strong. We are strangers in this land. So we don't expect everybody to treat us right. We know we live in an enemy land. The devil is out there. So if we focus on God, and if we focus, for me, that's what helped me to be strong and what I stand. So I think we shouldn't be caught up with the current issues of what the country and what the nation is going through, because our issues are different. I mean, we focus on God, teaching them what the Bible says, and they will come out strong. And that's what I learned for myself. So that's what I focus on, teaching them what God says, how much they're loved by God. They shouldn't expect everybody to show them love, but God loves them so dearly that he sent his son to redeem them. And putting them, that focus in them, help them to see the light.
Great.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. That's a good point. Is there anyone?
I'll just add on what my sister said. My name is Ruhi. I am from Maryland, a youth leader. While everything she said is true, we also have to be really careful not to minimize their experiences. Because when we're talking about racism in this country, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, what we really struggled with between parents and youth is when parents talk about Black Lives Movement, they're talking about like, it's their problem, you know? Yeah, problem or yeah, nasu problem. When it comes to our youth, it's our problem because they identify with the movement and with the struggle that's going on. So yes, our goal as a church needs to be to point them to Jesus and to anchor their identity in Jesus. But at the same time, we need to really be careful not to minimize their experiences, because we are people that are living in this world, being affected by what's going on in this world. So also empowering them is really important. But I agree with what she said. I just wanted to add that.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we're gonna, we have to move forward. The second question is this one. How should parents have a meaningful discussion with the young regarding racism? I'll repeat it. How should parents have a meaningful discussion with the young regarding racism? Early on Pastor Nabi's presentation, you mentioned this point. It's better to, you know, educate them earlier. And you mentioned about creation and fall, redemption, and consummation. Would you please explain it in this point, how that goes with this?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the earlier you can have, we shouldn't wait for George Floyd incidences to take place to begin to have this conversation. I think that could be one of our mistakes, right? We shouldn't wait for something to be popular in the culture. These should be conversations. I'm even pushing for, if we can, building a curriculum among our children's ministry, our youth ministry, and our Ethiopian and Eritrean churches. If we can have a curriculum, a robust curriculum for our own people on a proper theology of race and racism, help them. Because a lot of us were isolated. I mean, we go to Wednesday night, Friday night, Adan Salot, we have Sunday, we're always around our own people. And it's not really until you go off to college that you're going to be mixed. And unless you have an unusual situation, you don't really get exposed to all these, and it doesn't occur to you, you know, these subjects until later. So what I would say is we need to teach about race, that we all come from one blood, that we all have ultimately one set of parents, Adam and Eve, and every single one of us, regardless of what may distinguish us on the surface, come from that family line. We can talk about racism. The Bible doesn't use the word racism. So using those categories of the worldview, we would go to James and we would talk about partiality and prejudice. My brothers, do not be partial. God is not partial, it says. He's no respecter of persons. So that's one category. We'll teach on the Imago Dei. If we're supposed to reflect and mirror God, then we need to know what God is like. He's impartial. He's no respecter of persons. So part of what it looks like to represent God on the earth well, as a Christian, means I can't be partial, right? And so anytime I'm showing partiality, then I am getting away from what it looks like to mirror God, to be an image bearer of God. Partiality is prejudice, which means I don't need to wait for a black-white situation. I could be prejudiced on my worship team, in my choir, among my staff, among my church, family even, in-law relations, and so forth. It exists everywhere. When we really define it biblically, when it's basically prejudice, it's everywhere. It just happens to crop up in some of these other areas as well. And so I think providing the biblical vocabulary, when we don't have vocabulary that we give our kids, then what ends up happening is standpoint epistemology, white privilege, white fragility, you know, all of these sort of terms anti-racism, end up becoming the terms, the vocabulary words that our kids adopt because we never gave them a vocabulary.
Pastor Tariku, let me add something about Kachu. Gize Karlachu. Let me add. Yeah, but important strategic የሆነ ጥያቄ ነው ያነሳው አንዳንድ ጥናቶች እንደሚያሳዩት ሳይንቲፊክ በሴኩላር እንትን የተሰሩ እንደውም አንዷ PhD-ዋን በዚህ ላይ እንደሰራችው አፍሪካን አሜሪካን ያንግ ከ3 ወር ጀምሮ ልጆች የከለር ኢንቨንተሪ መለየት ይችላሉ ይሄ ማለት ለ3 ወር አንድ ነጭ ቶታሊ ነጭ የሆነ ቦታ ላይ አንድ ልጅ የሶስት ወር ንጻም ብታስቀምጠውና ከዛ ነጭ ቦታ አምጥተው ኮምፕሊትሊ ጥቁር ቦታ ኢመርስ ብታረጋው እንትን ያረጋል ኢንዴክሱ ይቸገራል አንድ ይሄንን እንድናውቅ ፈልጋለሁ ስለዚህ ይሄንን አድረስ የሚያደርጉልን የክርስቲያን ክሊኒካል ሳይኮሎጂስቶች አሉን በየትኛው እድሜ ላይ አፕሮፕሪየት የሆነ ኢሹ ነው የማይችሉትን ነገር በልጆች ጭነን ያለ እድሜያቸው ካመጣን በድሮ ጊዜ በኔ ትውልድ ምን ይባላል ይቅርታ ይሄንን ትንሽ ሬከርዱስ እንዳይቀመጥብኝ የሌሉ ትሮትስካይቶችን መዋጋት ለትሮትስካይቶች በር መክፈት ነው የሚል ነበር ድሮ የሌለን ነገር ኢንቫይት ማድረግ የለብንና ኤጁ ላይ ባለሙያዎችን በደንብ አርገን መያዝ አለብን አንደኛው ይሄ ነው ሌላው ይሄንን ነገር ለልጆቻችን ስናወራ ራሳችንን መጽዳት አለብን እኔ በየቦታው ንግግር ሳደርግ ልጆችን በሚመለከት በተለይ ከልጆች ጋር ሳወራ ልጆች የሚሉት you are hypocrites ነው የሚሉን ልጆቻችን ሬሲስት ናቸው ይሉናል ሁሉን የሚሉትን ለመቀበል አይደለም ግን grain of truth አለው ለምን ይሄናሉ በምን ምክንያት ይሄናሉ ማጥናት ይኖርብናል ዲስሚስ ማድረግ የለብንም ቅድም እህታችን ያለችው ነገር አለ የቀደመውን እህታችንን እንትን በመደገፍ ምንድነው እኛ ክርስቲያኖች ስንሆን እንኳን ልጆቹ ሌየርስ ኦፍ እንትን አለን ሶሻል አይደንቲቲ አለን ካልቸራል አይደንቲቲ አለን የታሪክ የሚሰጠን አይደንቲቲ አለን የፒር የፕሮፌሽን ሌላ ሙሉ አይደንቲቲ አለን ስለዚህ የሬስን ጉዳይ ስናረሳ ሬስን እንደ አንድ ካታጎሪ ብቻ ወስደን ሆሊስቲክ የሆነ ነገር አብረን ይዘን እዛ ላይ አምጥተን ካላየነው ጥሩ የሆነ ግንዛቤ ለራሳችንም ልንጨብጥ አንችልም ልጆቻችንን ማጨበጥ አንችልም መጽዳት አለብን እምላችሁ ምንድነው እኛም ራሳችን ከሀገር ቤት ይዘን የመጣነው ነገር አለ እንዳልኳችሁ ይሄ ባይነሪ ነገር ነጭና ጥቁር የሚለው ኮንቴክስቱ የለም ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ እነሱ ግን ሪያሊቲ ውስጥ ግን አለ ይሄ ባይነሪ እንትን አለ ስለዚህ ዲስከሽኑን ከልጆቻችን ጋር አንደኛ የጁን ነገር ጥንቃቄ ማድረግ እንዳለብን 12ም ሆነ 10 ስንጀምረው ግን ድሪል በማድረግ አይደለም አንደኛ መማር አለብን ራሳችንም የአፍሪካን አሜሪካን ኤክስፒሪየንስ ቅድም ፓስተር ነብዩ እንዳለው እኛ ጄነሬሽናሊ ዛውስት የለንም ፔኑን ታሪኩን ያለፉበትን እንትን እኛም ማወቅ አለብን ልጆቻችንም እንደሞ እንዲያውቁት ለምን እዛ ዓለም ውስጥ ነው የገቡ ያሉት ማወቅ ይኖርባቸዋል አያመልጡም ከዚህ we have to educate ourselves and we have to educate ሌላው ደግሞ ምንም ቢሆን ምን ከኢትዮጵያ ያገኙት ሄሪቴጅ እንዳይጠፋባቸው አንዳንዴ ሊጠቅም አንዳንዴም ሊጎዳ ይችላል ካገኘውት ኢንተርቪው አንዳንዶቹ ተጠቅመውናል ይላሉ አንዳንዶቹ ደግሞ እንዳውም ጎርቶናል ለምን ብዙ ነገር እንዳናቅ ነው ያደረገን አንዷ ደግሞ እንኳን እንዳውም ስለሬስ አልተነገረኝ አለች ለምን ብላት ከሁሉም ጋር እንድቀላቀል ያ ነገር ቤተሰብ ውስጥ አለመነሳቱ ከማንንም ጋር እንድቀላቀል ፕላስቲክ የሆነ እንትን እንዲኖርኝ አልችሎኛል ስለዚህ በሰፊው የሚጠና ጉዳይ ነው ሌላው ወሬውን ስናወራ እንዳልኳችሁ ልጆቹ በሚያዳምጡን ድሪል በማድረግ ሳይሆን የቻት አይነት ምን አለ ቡና ላይ ምን አለ ገበታ ላይ ይሄ ፎርማል የሆነ ነገር ሌክቸር አይወዱም ልጆቹ እኔ አሁን ልጆቼ ነው የሚሉኝ ገና ጀመረ ነው የሚሉት ክሬቲቭ የሆነ መንገድ መፍጠር አለብን ልጆቻችን ስሜታቸውን በሚጠብቅ ግን ሊያውቁት ኢንፎርምድ በሆነ መንገድ ልጆቻችንን ኮንቨርሴሽኑን ማስጀመር ይኖርብናል አይ ቲንክ ይሄንን ነው ለማለት የፈለኩት አንድ ነገር ልጨምርና አንድ አፍሪካዊ ጓደኛ አለኝ ፕሮፌሰር ነው የሜዲካል ዶክተር ኢንተርቪው አደረኩት እሱንም አንድ የልጁን ኤግዛምፕል ሰጠኝ ልጁ እነዚህ ናይጄሪያኖች በጣም ሰክሰስፉል ናቸው እንደኛ አይጨነቁም መተው እዚህ የነው ስራቸውን ሰርተው ያገር ነገር አይተበተባቸውም ልጆቻቸውን በቃ ሰክሰስፉል እንደሆኑ በዚህም በዛም anyway that's another story እና ልጆቹ በጣም ሰክሰስፉል ሆነዋል አንዱ መኪና እየነዳ ሲሄድ በጣም ትልቅ የዘመናዊ መኪና ነው ኤክስፔንሲቭ የሆነ ለምን ትልቅ ቦታ አለው በዛው ስታተስ ኮንሺየስ ናቸው ደግሞ እነዚህ በተለይ ሩባ እየነዳ ሲሄድ ፖሊስ ያቆመዋል for no reason except the fact that በጣም ውድ የሆነ መኪና በመንዳቱ ብቻ መኪና አቁሞ ጠይቆት ሁሉ ነገር ከሰጠው ከቼክ አረግ በኋላ ወረቀቱን መልማን ነው አይዲ ካርዱን መለሰለት ግን ጥያቄው ምንድነው ለምን ይሄን አደረገ ነው ለምንድነው ይሄን መላችሁ በእነሱ ራዳር ውስጥ ጥሩ መኪና ይዞ ከሄደ አሰምሽኑ ምንድነው ወይ ሰርቆ ነው ወይ በድረግ ነው እና ይሄ ነገር ይገጥማቸዋል ልጆቻችንን በየትኛው እድሜ እንዴት አድርገን ኮንቨርሴሽኑን እንደምንጀምር ዘዴው ብልሃቱ ተጠንቶ ለሁላችንም ይሄ ትልቅ ኢሹ ስለሆነ ባለሙያዎችን እናምጣ እንጨምር እባካችሁን አድምጡኝ ይሄ በአንድ ፕላትፎርም በአንድ አድሆክ እንትን የሚፈታ ጉዳይ አይደለም መነሳቱ ጥሩ ነው ግን ዘመቻ ይጠይቃል ክሩሴድ ይጠይቃል ለዚህ ነው institutions individuals including professionals family የነዚህ ሁሉ እንትን ሌቨሬጅ ዶኖ ታክልድ መሆን አለበት ኮስቲኑ
Thank you በጣም እናመሰግናለን ሐሳቡንም ምክሩንም እንቀበላለን እግዚአብሔር እናመሰግናለን ይሄንን ነገር በተደጋጋሚ ከተለያየ ስፍራ ከተለያየ አገልግሎት የመጣችሁ ከችልድረን ሚኒስትሪ እንደገና ከዩት ሊደርሶችም አላችሁ ያልመጡ ፓስተሮችም አሉ ይሄ ታክል እናደርገው የሚገባን ትልቅ ኢሹ ነው ስለምክሩ እግዚአብሔር እናመሰግናለን ፓስተሮች አሁን በዚህ ጥያቄ ላይ እንድትሳተፉ ደግሞ አደራላችኋለሁ ከዚህ በኋላ ባለው መጀመሪያ ፓስተር ነብይ ከዛ ዶክተር ጥበበ ጥቂት ሐሳብ ከሰጡ በኋላ I think this will be the last one ከጊዜ አንፃር በ12 ሰዓት ተኩል እንጨርሳለን ብለን ነበር ያው የሄደብናል ሰዓት ግን I'll give like another 10 minutes እና ሌሎቻችሁም ፓስተሮች እንድትሳተፉ አደራ እንላችኋለን the last question will be what should pastors or leadership in a local church can address the issue of identity or racism and what strategy should the diaspora church put in place to address this issue biblically and so I combined two questions together so መጀመሪያ first pastor nabi ከዛ በኋላ ዶክተር ጥበብ ተናገሩና ፓስተሮች come on jump ግቡና ሐሳባችሁን ስጡ this is very ጥሩ አጋጣሚ ነው ሐሳባችሁን ወርውሩና ከዛ የሚያዘጋጁልን የሚጽፉልን ሰዎች አሉ ከዚህ ጥናት አንፃር ሰብሰብ ብናረገውና ደግሞ ነገሮችን ለሚቀጥለው ዝግጅት ደግሞ የተሻለ መልክ እናዘጋጃለን okay let me give a chance to pastor Nabi first
Yeah, thank you, Pastor David. I would say, for starters, number one, preach the word. Preach the word in season and out of season. The whole word, the whole counsel of God. Feed your people well. Offer them a full, rich diet from God's word. Establish them a full biblical theology, especially as it touches this. Build that identity in Christ. I can't say that enough. I think the second thing I would say is don't be afraid when the time is appropriate and right to address racism head on. Where the Bible makes mention of it, go there and deal with it. Just like you may have a time to deal with abortion or any other social issues that plague us with human sexuality or other areas. If the Bible goes there, go there and make sure that your people hear from the congregation where the church stands, where you stand as a, don't allow racism to be able to have a warm, cozy place. Gubayost. You know, we need to make sure. I think the third thing I would say is we need to model for our congregations how to cross the aisle and build real relationships with people that may be different, other believers that may be different from us. So that may mean, you know, pastors may build relationships with other pastors from local congregations that are nearby in town. But it's not another Ethiopian or Eritrean, it's someone else. I think those could be ways where we're modeling, and take a picture of it when you're at Starbucks or you're at you know, a diner or cafe, and post it, you know, on your social media page, you and your colleague in the faith, building relationships. It'll be evident when they see black, white, or wherever, Filipino, Asian. You know, you still have your congregation, but you're at least saying, look, where I can, when I can, I'm willing to exercise some level of intentionality and form a relationship with someone I may not automatically do so with, given my circle. I had to, like a fish, jump out of the pond in order to form this. And then from there, allow that relationship to just naturally go in a direction where you'll talk about these things, you'll trust each other enough, and then you both may, you know, they call it pulpit swapping, you know. You can pulpit swap. Some of you, I'm sure, probably have already done this, where you bring someone in from the Bible college or seminary or from another church. You pulpit swap. You're sending a message to the congregation. Oh, he must have a relationship with this person. He brings them in, and vice versa. And I think even more than just pulpit swapping, because pulpit swapping could even be perceived as, oh, you're just tipping the hat, and oh, so you've done your job, really. You know, so I understand that sentiment. I think you can have serious conversations beginning with each other, because you feel like, a lot of times when pastors do this, they feel like they're more ahead than their congregation is prepared. But they're not sure if it will backfire if they bring it immediately to the church. So start there. Maybe create a podcast or some platform outside of Sunday where you air your program. You're on the stage with chairs. It's just you two. You didn't pressure the congregation to come. And you start this, and people can watch the panel discussion. And then from there, gradually, you bring that conversation, especially as you get feedback. Oh, Pastor, I saw that program you had on these relations. That was really good. I got something out of it. Who's that other pastor there? He's not Abishai. Oh, it's from town. Oh, okay. And the more you do that, and then you gradually bring it to the home church. And you can include even youth and young adults. You can have a variety of panels. If you have even police officers in your congregation, or you build a relationship, you can start having that conversation, because once you can do that, then you can start doing things together in the community, different endeavors. Like maybe we'll bring breakfast to the police station and just bless them together as a congregation, and just let them know we're praying for them. Or you can come into the community and do different types of work. But I think it all starts somewhere. And every one of us knows our congregation and what they're ready for better than anyone else. And so this is not to say this has to be done, but this is just to kind of stimulate the imagination. We can all start in different places. And you know, you never know who may want to take it. They may run your congregation member. There may be someone who could run with it more than you could. You just got the ball rolling, and the person says, "Oh, my pastor," and they'll take it from there. And I think those are some of the ways that we can involve in this way.
Let me jump in እንግዲህ ፓስተር ታሪኩ እኔ ነጥቦች ብቻ ነው ማስቀምጠው። አንደኛ ዝምታዊ ሰበር ነው። እንዲህ አይነቱ ኮንቨርሴሽን ይቀጥል፣ very important። ሁለተኛ አድሚት እናርግ፣ ይሄንን ኢሹ ኔግሌክት አድርገነዋል፣ አድሚት እናርግ፣ በእንትን ነው ማስቀምጠው። ሶስተኛ ብሪጅ መገንባት አለበት፣ ኢንተርጀነሬሽናል። ለዚህ ነው እንግዲህ ብሪጅን ላስተዋወቅ መድረኩ አይደለም። ያው ፓስተር ታሪኩ ታውቀዋለህ፣ ሌሎችም ቢያቆጥሩ ነው። It's an endeavor to this end. አይተን ነው ጉለቱን አይተን ነው ብሪጅ የሚደረጉ ብዙ ጋፖች አሉ ብለን ነው ዛስ ስፔስ ውስጥ ነው የገባን ነው እኛ ሚኒስትሪ። ስለዚህ ይሄ ብሪጅ በሁለት መልኩ ነው ጄነሬሽናል ብሪጅ መኖር አለበት በእኛና በልጆቻችን ኤክስፒሪየንሳቸውን ስቶሪያቸውን እንጋብዛቸው ያምጡልን ኦፕን ስፔስ እንስጣቸው የዛን ሰርድ ስፔስ ያልኩን ኤክስፒሪየንስ ያምጡልን it's a very inconvenient space ለነሱ ወዲያ የሚሉበት ያምጡት ስቶሪውን እናገኛቸው we have to invite them ሜዳውን ክፍት እናርግላቸው ወይም በአሁኑ ቋንቋ ማህደር የሚባለው ምህዳር ይቅርታ አድርጉልኝ it's a new language የኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ያለ ነው ይስፋ ስለዚህ ብሪጅ ሌላው ደግሞ ብሪጅ ምለው በጥቁሮች ይሄንን የተወነው ኤሪያ ነው እኔ አስታውሳለሁ አንድ ጊዜ ተጋብዤ እዛ ጓደኛ አለኝ ፓስተር ሊባ የሚባል አፍሪካን አሜሪካን እዛ ቤተሰቤን ሄጄ ነበር ልጆች ኤክሳይትድ ሆኑ በተለይ አሁን የሌለው ያንን ምልክት ግን ሚስ አድርጌዋለሁ እኛ ዋይት ቸርች ነው የምንሄደው ከመጣን ጀምሮ ልጆቻችንም እኛን ተከትለው ነው የሚሄዱት ምንድነው የሚሰጣቸው እንትን we don't know ዳያሎግ መኖር ይኖርበታል ከነሱ ጋር ይሄንን ነው ለማወቅ በእኛ እንትን ውስጥ ነው ኮን ፑሽ የምናደርጋቸው በእኛ ጋሪ ውስጥ ፑሽ ያደርግናቸው ከዛ በኋላ ሲያድጉ ራሳቸውን ሲችሉ ከጋሪው ይወጣሉ እናስብበት ትሬኒንግ ይኖር በቤተክርስቲያን ሎካል ቸርች ግዴለም ማክሮን አይደለም ሎካል ጥሩ ጥያቄ ነው ፓስተር ታሪኩ ያመጣው ሎካል መሆን አለበት ሎካል የተንሳፈፈ ነገር ያለ ነው እኛ ሎካል ውስጥ ነው አሁን ሁላችሁም እዚህ ሎካል ቸርቻችሁን ነው ሪፕሬዘንት አደረጋችሁ የመጣችሁት ሎካል ስራው እዛ ነው ያለው እንደዚህ አየር ላይ የምናወራው ነገር አይደለም ትሬኒንግ ይኖር በደንብ አድርገው ይሰጥ በዚህ ቦታ ላይ ሌላው አይደንቲቲ ላይ ትልቅ ትምህርት ይገርማቸዋል እንደው ዝም ብላችሁ አንድ 10 ልጆች ቤተክርስቲያን እናንተ ጋር ዘወትር የሚመጡ ወጣቶች እንደው ራንደም ሊፍቲ ፈንዳሜንታል የሆነ ጥያቄ አንሱ ስለምነታቸው ቀደም ፓስተር ታንዲኩ ማን ነው ነብዩ ያመጣው ወርልድ ቪው አለው ምን ያህል ይሄ የክርስቲያን ወርልድ ቪው ውስጣቸው አለ የሚጠብቃቸው ናቪጌት የሚያደርጉባቸው ሌላ ሁሉ ሌየር ኦፍ አይደንቲቲ ቢወድቅ ፎል ባክ የሚያደርጉበት ያ ፋውንዴሽን አይደንቲቲ ትልቅ ኢሹ ነው ወገኖቼ አይደንቲቲ ይሁት ናባጥ የሚባለው መጽሐፍ ቅዱስ ላይ አይ ቲንክ ሰከንድ ኪንግስ ይመስለኛል ነው ፈርስት ኪንግስ 20 ይመስለኛል ታሪኩ ያለው ያ ንጉስ መሬትን ስጠኝ ሽጥልኝ ሲለው የመለሰው መልስ ለአንድ ንጉስ ይሄ የኔ ንብረት አይደለም ከአንሴስተር የመጣ ነው የተሰጠኝ ነው ከእግዚአብሔርም በኢምፕሊኬሽን ያለፈውን ይወክላል ያሁንንም ይወክላል የነገውንም ይወክላል ኢንሄሪታንስ ነው ክርስትናም እንደዚህ ነው አይደንቲቲያችን በክርስቶስ ስታብሊሽድ ቢሆንም ብዙ ሰዎች ዋጋ ከፍለው እዚህ አድርሰውታል የኢትዮጵያ ቤተክርስቲያን ኮሚኒዝምን መቋቋም የቻለችው ጀግና ልጆች ወጣቶች ባክቦን ሆነው ያ ባይሆን ኖሮ ሚስዮን ይዞ የመጣው ቤተክርስቲያን ነው ክርስትና በገጠሩ የማርክሲዝም ኦንስላውት ሊቋቋም አይችልም ነበር እግዚአብሔር ያስነሳው ትውልድ ነው ጀግና ትውልድ ይሄንን መጽሐፍ ላይ ታገኙታላችሁ I'm not promoting please እኔ እንደዛ አይነት ሰው አይደለሁም ሌላችሁ የፈለኩት ምንድነው አይደንቲቲ ትልቅ ኢሹ ነው የኢንሄሪታንስ ጉዳይ ነው የማስቀጠል ጉዳይ ነው ይሄንን ማስፋትና ማስተማር ያስፈልጋል ሆሊስቲክ በሆነ መንገድ ያቺ እህታችን እንዳለችው very important ነው ስለዚህ ቤተክርስቲያን በተለይ ሎካል ቸርች ሰፋ አርጋ ማሰብ ይኖርባታል ቪዥኗን ካስት ታረግ ለነገው ትውልድ ሲስተማቲክ የሆነ ፈንዳሜንታል የሆኑ ነገሮችን በማስተማር ስነ ስርዓት ባለው ፕሪንሲፕል በሆነ መንገድ ዛሬን የሚያሻግር ስብከት ተሰብኮ ዛሬ ደግሞ ሽንሻገር እንደገና ደግሞ ሌላ ስብከት እየተፈለገ እንደ አይነት የኮንሱመር ካልቸር ምናመጣ ከሆነ አይጠቅመን ይረዳናል በተለይ ዳያስፖራው we need it displaced የሆነ ሎኬሽን ውስጥ ነው ያለነው የወቅቱ ቃል ያስፈልጋናል ሪደምፕቲቭ የሆነ ትራንስደንታል የሆነ አፕሊፍት የሚያደርጉ ነገሮች በየጊዜው ሊመጡልን በክሩሴድ በሪቫይቫል ሊመጡ ይጠቅሙናል ግን in the long run ስለ ትውልድ የምናስብ ከሆነ ግን ዘላቂና ሰስቴይነብል የሆነ ሲስተሚክ ነገር መጣል በሎካል ቸርች very essential ነው ብዬ አስባለሁ ለዚህ ነው ቅድም የአንከርን ኤግዛምፕል ያመጣሁት አንከርድ የሆነ መልኩ አንከርድ የሆነ ምንም እንኳን ቮቱ ሮክ ቢደረግ በንፋስ አንከሩ ስትሮንግ ከሆነ የአይደንቲቲው አንከር ስትሮንግ ከሆነ ቦታውን አይለቅም። ጌታ ይባርካችሁ።
Thank you ዶክተር ጥበበ። ዝምታው ይሰበር፣ በስተታችን አድሚት እናድርግ፣ ብሪጅ እንገንባ፣ ጀነሬሽናል ጋፕ እና ትሬኒንግ ይኑር። አይደንቲቲ ዋናው መሰረት ነው ያልከን፣ እግዚአብሔር እናመሰግናለን። ፓስተርስ this is a good time and ለእናንተ እድል ሰጣችኋለሁ። I'll give a chance for 2 pastors at least እና እግዚአብሔር ይባርካችሁ። እዚህ ውስጥ ብዙ እግዚአብሔር የሚጠቀምባችሁ ፓስተሮች አላችሁ፣ አገልጋዮች። this is a good time በእነኚህ ጥያቄዎች ላይ በተለይ አሁን በተነሳው ላይ ይሄንን ሁኔታ በሎካል ቸርች እንዴት ነው አድሬስ ማድረግ የምንችለው፣ ደግሞ ስትራቴጂክ በሆነ መንገድ እንዴት ነው ይሄንን አድሬስ ማድረግ የምንችለው፣ ለሎካል ቸርችም ለኮሚኒቲም እንዴት ነው ይሄንን ማስተላለፍ የምንችለው የሚለውን እስቲ 2 ፓስተሮች ከተናገራችሁ በኋላ በኔ በኩል ያው ጨርሻለሁ። ፓስተር መካሻ ይቀጥላል ማለት ነው። አሁን 2 ፓስተሮች ፕሊዝ ጃምፕ አድርጉና ተናገሩ። ጌታ ይባርካችሁ።
መሰለኝ ልናገር ፓስተር?
Sure. Right.
Samuel in Indianapolis. I would like to say thank you for the presenters. They raised a very profound topic, and the discussion entirely was very useful. I just have a quick question, probably mainly directed to Pastor Neb. Maybe Professor also might add on to that. From my understanding and from what I infer from your presentation, by the end of the day, the issue of racism is here to stay. It's not going to go away tomorrow, or no matter how strong the legislation or no matter how preventive measures are taken. So basically, it's a question. This question is not about the skin, but rather it's a question of sin. So my question is, how can we take advantage of this situation, this chaos, to communicate to our children, the new generation, about the sin factor that we all struggle with, so that it would lead us to our main task of evangelizing to the new generation, so that they could break free, not only from the issue of racism, but from the issue of sin as well. Thank you.
That's a good question, Brother Sami. My response to that would be understand, depending on who they are and how much they identify with what is presently going on, because everyone is different. You got to be I think we would have to be sympathetic toward that. Ease your way in to making sure that they know that we get them. We want to, maybe we don't get them, but we're willing to learn. We're willing to hear them out. We're willing to sit with them and identify with them. So that they can take the time. Maybe it'll take them a while to be able to articulate what they're feeling. It may be one thing to feel one way, but you may not have the ability to know how to articulate that. So it may take time, but in any case, I think it's well worth it. And then I think it's important that we find some sort of platform, some sort of venue that's conducive to doing exactly what you just asked, to doing that. Because I think the context is just as important as what you want to do, and that is teach them, supply them, inform, bring this point of view to bear, that racism is a heart issue. And if it's a heart issue, at the end of the day, ultimately the gospel is the only solution that could ultimately address that sort of heart issue. Jesus said it's not what goes into a man, but what comes out. It's from a man's heart that all of these evil things come out. And so I think with COVID-19, having safe spaces, I know there's a lot of talk about safe space, but I think in a positive way, having a safe space where they know that they're going to be regarded. If you already have a good relationship with them, you have an advantage. You see, the problem is if there's no relationship there already, this is already a tough conversation to have. But if you already have a good relationship with the ones you have in mind, then you can leverage that because they know you, you know them, you know each other. So you can go there, you can have those conversations and you could supply them with these things. But if not, the first place is to build a relationship and then just go to the Bible and let's talk about what does the Bible have to say to us, not only about the issue or the problem of racism, but what is God's vision for addressing it?
አጭር እንትን ልስጥ እንግዲህ ፓስተር ታሪኩ በጣም አጭር የሆነ ሪስፖንስ
እሺ
አንደኛ ሬሲዝም ኢዝ ኮንስትራክት ይሄንን እንወቅ በሚቻለው መንገድ ይሄንን ማስረዳት ለራሳችንም እንዲገባን ያስፈልጋል ኮንስትራክት ነው በተለይ እንደ ሂስቶሪያን እኔ ማቀውን ያህል 19th ሴንቸሪ ከዚህ ከትራንስ አትላንቲክ ስሌቭ ትሬድ ጋራ በተያያዘ አንፎርቹኔትሊ ክርስቲያኖችም በዚህ ውስጥ የገቡበት በዚህ በንግድ ውስጥ የገቡበት ጀስቲፋይ ሊያደርጉት የተጠቀሙበት ሚንስ ነው ዌፐናይዝ አድርገውታል ይሄንን ማወቅ ይኖርበታል የለም ኢን ሪያሊቲ የለም ይሄ ኢምፖርታንት ነው አንድ ሁለተኛ እኛ እንደ እግዚአብሔር ሰው ነው አሁን ማስበው እኛ በዚህ ምድር ብንኖርም እኔ አንድ ጊዜ የእንትን ታሪክ ልንገራችሁና የራሴን ታሪክ ባለቤቴ የኤርትራ ሰው ነች እና ይሄ የኤርትራ ኢሹ እና ኢትዮጵያ ኢሹ ሲመጣ እንደ ሂስቶሪያን ቀደም ብዬ በልጅነቴም ደግሞ ፖለቲክስ ውስጥ ኢንቮልቭ ስላደረኩኝ ይሄ ነገር ይመጣል ሲናሪዮን ቁጭ አረኩላት ሳይሆን ስለዚህ በኔ ምክንያት አይደንቲቲሽን የምትፈልጊውን አይደንቲቲ ምረጪ ጀማይካዊ ነው ብትኝ እቀበልሻለሁ ኢደዝ ማረር ስለዚህ ነፃ ላረግሽ ፈልጋለሁ ብዬ ሊሊት ቀስቅሼ ነው እናናገርኳት እና አረሳውም ያለችኝ እንዴት ይሄን ጥያቄ አነሳው እኔ እናንተኮ የሰማያዊ ሲቲዝን ነን ያ ነው የሚያገናኘን ስትለኝ ከኔ በእድሜ የምታንስነች ጭጭ አልኩኝ ይሄ ከባድ ነው ይሄንን እንዴት አድርገን ነው በኢተርናል እንትን ውስጥ ልጆቻችንም ራሳችንንም እኮ ስናየው እኮ that's our home for eternity የምንሄድበት ግን ይሄ ሲባል ቅድም እህቴ እንዳለችው ዲናይ ማድረግ አይደለም ልጆቹ የሚያልፉበት አለ ያንንም ማስተንፈስ መቻል ይኖርብናል እየረዳናቸው የሚያስፈልገውን ቱል እየሰጠናቸው ናቪጌት የሚያደርጉበትን ግን ትልቁ ነገር ሆም የሚባል አለ ይሄ ምድራዊ እንትን ውስጥ ወንድሜ ፓስተር ሳሚ እንዳነሳው ሲን የፈጠረው ክሮል ሪያሊቲ ነው ዲፕሬቭድ የሆነ ዓለም የፈጠረው ነው የለም ስለዚህ ባጠቃልለው ይሄንን ከክርስቶስ ኢየሱስ ጋር ነፃ ካወጣን ልጆቻችንም ሆነ እኛ ምን አይነት ጓደኝነት አለን ከናንተ ጋራ ነኝ የሚለው እግዚአብሔር ሁሉን ትራምፕ የሚያደርገው የሱ ማንነት ከኛ ጋራ እያለ ይሄ ቀላል ነገር አይደለም በልጆች ውስጥ ይሄን ማስጨረስ ቀላል አይደለም ግን ይሄ የበላይ ሆኖ ትራንስደንታል የሆነ አፕሊፍት እየሰጠን የሚገጥማቸው ልጆቻችን የሚገጥማቸውን ነገር የሚሻገሩበት ኃይል ይዘው ይሄዳሉ ግን በዚህ ውስጥ መማር ይኖርባቸዋል ብዙዎቹ ኢንተርቪው ያረኳቸው ልጆችም እንደሚሉት ራሳቸውን ኤዱኬት ያያረጉ ይሄ ከኢግኖራንስ የመጣ ነው እያሉ እንዲሚሏቸውንም እያስተማሩ በዚህ አይነት ያጠናከሩ ራሳቸውን ይቀጥላሉ ግን ከሁሉም ይበልጠው ግን ይሄ ነው ከክርስቶስ ጋር ያለ ልጆችም ያላቸው ግንኙነት ያ ምስጢር ከገባን ልጆቻችንም ውስጥ ሰርጾ ከገባ አይ ቲንክ የሚያልፉበት ትልቁ የሚሻገሩበት ትልቁ ኃይላቸው ይሄ ይመስለኛል እንዴት አድርገን ይሄንን ኢንካልኬት እናርግ ጥበቡና ዊዝደሙን እግዚአብሔር ይስጠን
ከፓስተሮች አንድ ሰው
አስተምጬ ነበር ቅድም
ልግባ።
ኦኬ ፓስተር ታምራት ከዛ
እሺ ጌታ እግዚአብሔር ይባርካችሁ ሁለታችሁም ዶክተር ጥበብም ፓስተር ነብዬም በጣም ድንቅ የሆነ ጥናት ነው ያደረጋችሁትና ያቀረባችሁበትን መንገድ እኔ ለሁሉም የምለው I always try to be balance እና practical መሆን በጣም ነው የምወደውና ፓስተር ነብዬ ካባለው ቃሉን እናስተምር ያለው ላይ ትንሽ እንዲሁ ሀመር ማድረግ ነው የምፈልገውና ዘረኝነት ያው በኃጢአት የወደቀ ተፈጥሯችን ነጸብራቅ መሆኑን በጣም ማስመር I hope ነብዬ ተሰማለ ፓስተር ነብዬ አይደል? ኦኬ በጣም ግን እንትን አድርጌ ለመናገር ስለሚመቸኝ ነው በአማርኛ የምናገረው እና በኃጢአት የወደቀ ተፈጥሯችን ነጸብራቅ መሆኑ ላይ በጣም ማመን አለብን እላለሁ። ነጭም ሆነ ማንኛውም ዘረኛ የሚሆነው ቀለሙ ነጭ ስለሆነ አይደለም። ቀለሙ ነጭ ስለሆነ አይደለም ዘረኛ የሚሆነው ወይ ጥቁር የሚጠላ ካለ obviously አለ። ለጥቁሮች መብት የታገሉ ብዙ ነጮች እንዳሉ ስንት ሚሊዮን እንደሆኑ አናውቅም። መታገል ብቻ ሳይሆን ለዚህ ዓላማ ህይወታቸውን የሰጡ ነጮች በጣም ብዙ እንዳሉ ሁላችንም እናውቃለን። እና ነጭን ዘረኛ ማለት ለይቶ ትክክልና ተገቢ እንዳልሆነ እኛ ትልቆቹም ማመን ልጆችንም ማስተማር በኮንግሪጌሽናችንም ይሄንኑ ማስተማር በጣም ተገቢ ይመስለኛል። ዘረኝነት ቀለም ያመጣው ቀለም የፈጠረው ነገር እንዳልሆነ ዘረኝነት አቲቲዩድ እንደሆነ በኃጢአት የወደቀው ማንነታችን ነጸብራቅ እንደሆነ I think ይሄንን ማስተማር በጣም የሚያስፈልገን ይመስለኛል። you know what about us እኛ እንደ ኢትዮጵያውያን ለሌሎች አፍሪካውያን ያለን አቲቲዩድ ምን አይነት ነው? how about us ኬንያዊ ናይጄሪያዊ ማላዊ ወይም ሌላ የአፍሪካ ሰው ሳይ ምንድነው የሚሰማኝ? እኔ ራሴ አፍሪካዊ ነኝ፣ ራሴ ጥቁር ነኝ። ግን ራሴን እንዲያውም ሌሎች የአፍሪካ ወንድሞቻችንን ጥቁር ነው ምንድነው ጥቁር እና ዘረኝነት የቀለም ጉዳይ ሳይሆን የአቲቲዩድ ጉዳይ መሆኑ ላይ በጣም ማሰብና ማተኮር በጣም የሚያስፈልገን ይመስለኛል። ከዛ አልፈን በጣም ይሄድን እንደሆነ አገራችን ትውልድ አገራችን ኢትዮጵያ ማለት ነው አሁን ሳፈር የምታደርገው በነጭ ነው ወይ? የትኛው ነጭ ሄዶ ቀኝ ገዝቶ ወይም ሀብት ንብረት ዘርፎ ወይም እስር ቤት ከቶ ከቀለም ጋር የተያዘ ጉዳይ እንዳልሆነ ዘረኝነት በጣም ልናሰምንበት በጣም ጠጋ ብለን ልናየው ያስፈልጋል ብዬ ነው የማስበው። በቅርቡ የሀገራችን ዘረኝነት ትኩሳቱ በጣም ከፍ ባለበት ሰሞን አንድ ፓስተር እያስተማረ በዙም ላይ ምዕመኑን ኮንግሪጌሽኑን እያስተማረ ከመመኑ መካከል መኪና መጥቶ በሩን አንኳኳ። ታቆማለህ ወይስ አታቆምም ትምህርት የሚል ይሄ ዓለማዊ አይደለም የሆነ ምናምን ዱርዬ ምንለው አይደለም። ሲማርኩ በቤተ ክርስቲያን ከአባላቱ መካከል ሲማር የነበረ ሰው ነው መኪና አስነስቶ መጥቶ በሬን አንኳኳ አለ፣ አስፈራራኝ አለ፣ ሁለተኛ ብታደርግ እንደዚህ ብሎ ዝቶ ተመለሳል። እና racism is not, it doesn't have, I don't see any connection with a color. is an attitude የወደቀው ማንነታችን የወደቀው ባህሪያችን ነጸብራቅ ነው፣ ማሳያ ነው፣ መገለጫው ነው ዘረኝነት ብዬ ነው የማምነው። እና ይሄ ዘረኝነት ሁላችንም ውስጥ በተወሰነ ደረጃ አንዳንዶቻችን በዚህ በዲሳይፕልሺፕ በክርስትና ህይወት በመታሸት በመውደቅ በመነሳት እየረገፈልን እየቀለለልን ይሄዳል እንጂ ትንሽ ሁላችንም ጋር let us be honest ልጆቻችን ሴት ልጆቻችን አንድ አፍሪካን አሜሪካን ጥቁር የሆነ ወንድም ጓደኛ ብትይዝ ኢትዮጵያዊ ወይም ኤርትራዊ ጓደኛ እንዳገኘች ያህል እንፈነድቃለን ወይ? ቁም ነገሩ ትዳር የትዳር ጓደኛ የምትወደውን ማግኘቷ ነው እንጂ ነጭና ጥቁር መሆኑ አይደለም በጌታ ይሁን እንጂ ብለን የምንቀበልበት አቅም አለን ወይ? እውነቱን ለመናገር እና እዛ ድረስ ነው የምንፈተነው። ወርደን ደግሞ ከአንድ የሆነ ናሽናል ብሔር ወይ ቀለም ወርደን ደግሞ በጣም ኤትኒክ ምንድነው በጣም ሰፈር መተን ደግሞ እኮ በአማራ በኦሮሞ በጉራጌ በትግሬ መካከልም እኮ በጣም ከባድ ትግል እኮ ነው ያለው እኛም ውስጥ ማለቴ ነው። እና ያው ባለቀ ሰዓት ስለሆነ የምናገረው እንዳላስቸግር እኔ ባጭሩ ዘረኝነት የቀለም ጉዳይ እኔ አስተማሪ ያለ መጽሐፍ ቅዱስ ትምህርት ቤት ሄድኩበት ፕሬዝዳንት እስካሁን ድረስ ባገኘኝ ቁጥር ጉያ ውስጥ አስገብቶ ሳይስመኝ ሳቅፈኝ ነጭ ነው እናት ብላት አፍሪካዊ አይደለም ኢትዮጵያዊም አይደለም። የዚህን ሰው ፍቅር እንዴት ነው ላሳንስ ላራክስ ላንቋሽሽ የምችል ነጭ በመሆኑ ምክንያት ደምሬ ከሌላው ነጭ ጋር ማለት ነው። እና ቀለም አይደለም እኛም ውስጥ አለ በሰፈር ውስጥ ሁሉ አለ በመንደር በትንንሽ መንደሮች ሁሉ ውስጥ ዘረኝነት ነው። በተለይ አሁን እኛ እንደው ከእግዚአብሔር ጸጋ የተነሳ ማስተማርን በጊዜውም አለ ጊዜውም እንዳለው ፓስተር ነብይ ማስተማርም ስላለብን እንጂ at this very moment እኛ ኢትዮጵያውያን ስለ ዘረኝነት የማስተማር አቅምም እንኳን የለንም። ማስተማር ከቻለን የራሳችንን ህዝብ ነው ማስተማር ያለብን። የራሳችንን ህዝብ በጣም ያልወጣንበት እንዲያውም ከቀን ወደ ቀን እየሰመጥን እየገባን ብዙ ቤተሰብ በቤቱ ልጆቹን ኦሮሞ ቤተሰብ ሆነ ኦሮምኛ ነው ኦሮምኛ አፍ እንዲፈታ ነው የሚያደርግ። ትግሬ ቤተሰብ ሆነ በትግርኛ አፍ እንዲፈታ ነው የሚታገለው። ይሄ I'm not talking about just any የሆነ ሌመን ኢትዮጵያዊ ምናምን የምናገረው አገልጋዮች የሆኑ መሪዎች የሆኑ በጌታ ቤት የቆዩ በጣም ነው የሚቸገሩት በተለይ በዚህ ጊዜና እኔ ምንድነው ሶሉሽኑ ለተባለው ዘረኝነት ከቀለም የወጣ መሆኑን በኃጢአት የወደቀ ማንነታችን ነጸብራቅ መሆኑን ባገኘነው አጋጣሚ ሁሉ በመስበክና በማስተማር ጥቁሮች እኛ ጥቁር በመሆናችን ነጭን እንዳንጠላ ጥቁር በነጭ እንዳይጠላ ነጭ በጥቁር እንዳይጠላ ፌር ኤንድ ባላንስ የሆነ ወንጌል አጥብቀን መስበክ አለብን። ነፃ ሊያወጣን የሚችል ወንጌል ብቻ ነው። እውነትን ታውቃላችሁ እውነት አርነት ያወጣችኋል እንደሚል የወጣቶች መሪዎች እንዳላችሁ አይቻለሁ። ጥቁር ስለሆንክ እንዲህ ብትደረግ ወይም እንዲህ ተደርገሃል ይሄ ጎድሎብሃል ይሄ ተነፍገሃል የሚል ፖለቲካ ነክ ስብከትና ትምህርት እንዳይነገር እንዳይሰበክ እና ዘረኝነት በቀለም የሚመጣ እንዳልሆነ ልጆቻችን ከነጭ ጋር እንዲተቃቀፉ ከጥቁር አፍሪካን ጋር እንዲተቃቀፉ ጓደኛ እንዲሆኑ እና እንደዚህ የመሳሰለ ነገር በቤትም በኮንግሪጌሽንም ከዛ ወረድ ብለን ህዝባችንን ከትግሬ ከአማራ ከምናምን ከመሳሰለ የሰፈር ዘረኝነትም ነፃ እንዲወጣ ጨክነን ማስተማር እግዚአብሔር ቃል ወንጌል በመንፈስ ቅዱስ ኃይል ከተሰበከ ብቻ ነው ነፃ ሊያወጣ የሚችል ለማለት ነው። ኦኬ እንዳልኩ ተስፋ አደርጋለሁ። እግዚአብሔር ይባርካችሁ። ስለ ትምህርታችሁም ሆነ ስለ ዝግጅቱ ፓስተር ታሪኩን አዘጋጆችንም ጨምሮ እግዚአብሔር ይባርካችሁ ለማለት ወዳለሁ።
Thank you ፓስተር ታምራት እግዚአብሔር ይመስገን።
Pastor Tariku, one thing. Pastor Tamrat brought up a very important point. This is key right here. You see, that's where the line is drawn. He was basically speaking from what he knows in the Bible. The problem is, if we don't vaccinate, if we don't teach our kids, that other ideology I talked about will swoop in. The framework is critical race theory, CRT, which comes from that neo-Marxism. You see, white-black. The white-black dynamic comes from there because Marx was dealing economically with issues, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. After him, cultural Marxism, neo-Marxism took the concept and broke up human beings in terms of oppressor and oppressed groups. And those who belong to the oppressor groups are male, they're white, they're cisgender, meaning they're not transgender, they're heterosexual, okay? And they're able-bodied. They have no disability. They don't need a wheelchair. Those are your 5 areas, okay? And if you look at that, the oppressed group will be females, and they will be transgender, and they will be non-white, and they will be not able-bodied, and they will be LGBTQ, homosexual or not, the homosexual or queer or lesbian. And so the problem is the conversation of race is brought in with this. And so where these categories come from are from critical race theory. So if our kids adopt critical race theory to define and to make sense of the social construct of race, we'll never get anywhere that we want to get to agreed upon. That's why we want to start with the Bible, because when we go to the Bible, it doesn't use the word race. The definition of racism is sinful ethnic prejudice. Notice there's no language of white or black there. It's sinful ethnic prejudice, which means it can exist in Africa or it can exist here. And that's an important point to make, I would say. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Pastor Yirdaw ትናገርና ከዛ በኋላ አንድ እህታችን ከላይፍ ኤክስፒሪየንሷ የምትነግረን ነገር አለ። እሷን ሰምተን ፓስተር መካሻው እንግዲህ የሚቀጥለውን በጸሎት ትዘጋልናል ማለት ነው። ጌታ ይባርካችሁ።
Okay. Thank you both of you guys who present a wonderful presentation. ሁለት ነገር ነው እኔ ማለት የምፈልገው። አንደኛው ሐሳብ ነው ማቅረብ የምፈልገው ምናልባት ላዘጋጁ ግሩፕም ይሆናል። ፕሮብሌሙ ሪል ነው፣ በጣም ሪል ነው፣ በተለይ በሰከንድ ጄነሬሽን በልጆቻችን ላይ እና parenting for both pastors and pastor wives, and so parenting, how to parent the second generation as first generation በሚል እንደው ዝግጅት ቢኖር ሪል የሆነ ፕሮብሌም ስላለ እኔ አንድ ከኤክስፒሪየንስ አንድ በቤት የደረሰውን ልንገራችሁ። የኔ ሁለት ልጆች አሉኝ። አንደኛው 21 አንደኛው 18 ነችና አንደኛው ወንድ ነው እና ሚድል ስኩል ላይ he was top student፣ በጣም ጎበዝ ተማሪ ነበር ሚድል ስኩል ላይ እና ሃይ ስኩል ላይ ሲገባ ድንገት ቀነሰብን፣ አቴንሽኑም ቀነሰብን፣ ነጥቡም ቀነሰብንና በጣም ተጨነቅን። ምንም ስንጠይቀው አይነግረንም። እኔና ባለቤቴ በጣም እንጸልያለን፣ እንነግረዋለን፣ እንጠይቀዋለን፣ ምንም አይናገርም። ከብዙ አመታት በኋላ he is now in college አንድ ቀን ቀስ ብሎ የሆነ ነገር ነገረኝ። you know what አለኝ፣ እኔ የነጮችን አቴንሽን እኔ ላይ እንዲሆን አልፈልግም፣ so I want to be a medium student. what? እና ይሄ ስትራግል በውስጡ ነበረ እና በጣም ዲሲፕሊን የሆነ ልጅ ነው እና የነሱን አቴንሽን እኔ ጋር ማድረግ አልፈልግም እና ለሌላ ነገር መጋለጥ ስለማልፈልግ I want to be a medium student. That's why I just dropped. እና ይሄ ስትራግል እነሱ ጋር እንዳለ ሁልጊዜ የምንነጋገረው ነገር ነውና how to parent፣ እንዴት ልጆቻችንን መቅረብ እንዳለብን ቅድም እንዳልኩት ከካልቸር ይዘነው የመጣነው as a first generation ስላለ እዚህ ጋር ደግሞ በአሜሪካ ውስጥ second generation እንዴት ሬዝ ማድረግ እንዳለብን እንደው parenting experience ከሆኑ fruitful ከሆኑ እንደ ነብዬ ካሉ ፓስተር ነብይ ጋር ካሉ ሰዎች ጋራ ላይፍ ኤክስፒሪየንስም ሼር ያደረግን ባልና ሚስትን ወላጆችን ማስተማር የሚቻልበት አንድ ነገር ቢታሰብ ሪኮመንድ አደርጋለሁ። ሁለተኛው ጥያቄ ነው በተለይ ደግሞ ለዶክተር ጥበበ ማቀርበው about the identity. ዶክተር ጥበበ እኛ ኢትዮጵያውያን have unique identity የሚል ሐሳብ ብሏል። ያው ብዙዎቻችንም እንለዋለን፣ ለልጆቻችን ለማስረዳት ግን በጣም ችግር ነው እና ምንድነው የኔ ጥያቄ? yes colonized አልሆንም፣ እዛ ላይ unique identity አለን፣ ግን we all are from Africans, Ethiopians. ምንድነው ከሌሎች አፍሪካንስ black እንዳልሆንን የሚያስረዳ is there any historical research? ጥቁሮች እንዳልሆንን የሚያስረዳ historical research finding አለ ወይ? ይሄንን ጥያቄ ነው መጠየቅ የምፈልገው። thank you።
በመሰረቱ ሰዓቱ አልቋል። ጥያቄ በዚህ ሰዓት መጠየቅ ሐሳብ
ስላልተሰጠን ነው መጀመሪያ።
እሺ አንድ ደቂቃ ልስጥ ዶክተር ጥበብ።
አጭር መልስ ነው ያለኝ። የለም ኢትዮጵያውያኖች እኔ ምንድነው ትልቁ ነገር እኔ ያልኩት እኔ አሁን ክሊር እንዲሆን ኮንቴክስቱ የለም። አሁን የኔ አባት በጣም ቀይ ናቸው፣ በጣም ቀይ። አንድም ቀን ያንን ከለር ኮሽን ማረግበት ኦኬዥኑም ሞሜንቱም ተፈጥሮ አያውቅም። ለምን የተለያየ ቀለም ያለው ህዝብ አለ እዛ ውስጥ እና ጥቁር የሚለው ካለር ብዙ ነገር ዴዚግኔት ቢያደርግም ሰው ላይ ስንመጣ ነጭን ቀይ የሆነውን ሰው ቀይ ነው የምንለው፣ ነጭ ብለን አንልም። ይሄ እንግዲህ የኛ ኤክስፒሪየንስ ነው። ነገር ግን ይሄንን ያመጣሁት እኔ ምንድነው ኢትዮጵያውያኖች በዚህ ምክንያት እዚህ ስንመጣ ትንሽ ከለር ብላይንድ ነን ለማለት ነው እንጂ there is no study, there is no research። አንተ እንዳልከው ኢትዮጵያውያኖች ጥቁር አይደለም የሚል የለም። በኃይለ ሥላሴ ላይ ትልቅ ጥያቄ መቶ ነበር። አንድ ጊዜ እነ ዱቦዋ አንስተዋል፣ ሌሎችም የሲቪል ራይት ሙቭመንት የቀደሙት ኢንክሉዲንግ ምለው ማን ነው ይሄ ለራስ ተፈሪያን ሙቭመንት መነሻ ምክንያት የሆነው ማርክስ ጋርቬ፣ እነሱ ሁሉ ጥያቄ አቅርበዋል። ኢትዮጵያውያኖች ራሳቸውን በተለይ ኃይለ ሥላሴ ራሳቸውን እንደ ጥቁር አያዩም ብለው፣ ኃይለ ሥላሴም ደግሞ ለዚህ መልስ ሰጥተዋል። እዚህ ድረስ መጥተው 1954 እዚህ ድረስ መጥተው ቺካጎ ጥቁር ቸርች ሄደው ጥቁራውንም ኮት አንኮት ሃዋርድ ዩኒቨርሲቲ ሄደው ፐብሊክሊ። ስለዚህ መልሱ አጭር ነው።
Thank you. አንድ ልጅ ያለች ሮሃ ባይቻ ገባሽ?
I just wanted to add two quick things.
Right.
When we're talking about building bridges, I want to touch on that. The first thing I want to say, really, this conversation and this trainings, there's so much healing in this, because we needed to have these conversations. One thing I really want to emphasize is parents that don't have the opportunity to have this kind of discussions and trainings are really struggling. That's what we're seeing from a youth leader perspective. So our responsibility is really to build bridges, not only between races, but between the youth and the parents as well. So for the most part, as the youth leader, what I do is translating. So when mom and dad come into a counseling session, hey, mom and dad, this is what your kid is trying to say, or to the kid, this is what mom and dad are intending to say. So as people who have the honor to serve in this way, we need to take responsibility to build those bridges and do a lot of translating. And the second thing I want to share, one of the things we did in our church at Addis Lidet, at our youth ministry, I think it was last year or the year before, we did a conference. This was a 3-day conference, which we invited different youth ministries, not just Ethiopian and Eritrean youth ministries, but from different ethnicities as well. So to be able to have them in our churches, leading worship and worshiping with them, because for the older generation, really, internet is almost Ethiopia, solely Ethiopia, no minarago. I hear a lot of parents that tell me, "Bamarinya worship kalarago worship mar endarago maisamacho," or it's not spiritual enough. We have that really misleading thinking. So to be able to see other ethnicities, African Americans, we had African American drummer that came and served, worship leaders from other skin color and ethnicities coming and worshiping together. There's so much healing in that. So really, as for churches and leaders, I want to say that I want to take this opportunity to really thank our Pastor Makasha, for giving us this platform to be able to do that. So if we open our doors as Ethiopian and Eritrean churches, we claim that we're international churches, but we're really not international. If we pick up on the diversity, the English service is really inviting this pastors. I like what Pastor Nabi said, going to Starbucks and taking pictures with African American and white pastors and leaders. There's so much work to be done in that. So to give them the freedom, really, you have an African American friend, you have a white friend, you have Asian, whatever ethnicity friend, it's okay. Bring them to church. Let them hear about Jesus, because the place, even our English service, is not just for Ethiopians or people that look like us. So maybe creating that kind of platform to bring Christian youth from different ethnicities and walk of life together we can maybe minimize that difference and really make it easier for our youth to look like Christ in the context and in the country that we're in right now. I just wanted to share that, but thank you for having us. This was incredible.
Thank you so much. እግዚአብሔር ይባርካችሁ። እንግዲህ አሁን ሰዓቱ በጣም ስለሄደ እንጂ ይሄ የሚቆም ነገር አይደለም፣ በቃ የሚቀጥል ነገር ነው። በውስጣችሁም ያለውን ሐሳብ እንዲሁ መገመት ይችላል። ብዙዎቻችሁ ብዙ ነገር ለመናገር እንደምታስቡ እና ጥሪያችንን አክብራችሁ ስለመጣችሁ እግዚአብሔርን ባርካለን። ፓስተር መካሻ ገብተህ መጸለይ ትችላለህ። ፓስተር ነብይ፣ ዶክተር ጥበበ, we really appreciate you so much and so much. May God bless you. ምናልባት እንግሊዘኛ የተጠቀምንበት ዋናው ምክንያት አሁን እህታችን እንደተናገረችው ብሪጅ ለማድረግ ነው እንጂ ሌላ አይደለም። ስለዚህ አንዱ ብሪጅ የሚጀምረው ቋንቋውንም አብረን ካልቸሩንም ለማገናኘት ፈቃደኞች መሆናችንን እንዲያውቁልን አውቀናል ማለታችን ሳይሆን በቃ we want you እያልን ነው በተሰባበረ ቋንቋ ምንናገረው። ስለዚህ ለዛ ነው ይሄንን ፎረም ክፍት ያደረግነው፣ ልጆቻችንን ወደኛ እንዲመጡ እንዲራመዱ እንዲገቡና ሐሳባቸውን እንዲናገሩ። ፓስተር መካሻው ስፍራውን መውሰድ ትችላለህ። ይባርካችሁ።
Thank you ፓስተር ታሪኩ። እግዚአብሔር ይባርካችሁ። በጣም እንግዲህ የቤት ስራ እየወሰድን ነው። ምን ያህል አስፈላጊ ኢሹዎችን አድሬስ እየተደረጉ እንደሆነ ዛሬ ትንሽ ነገር ነው አንስተን የተወያየ ነው። እግዚአብሔር ይረዳናል። በሚቀጥለው በሰፊው ሌሎችንም ኢሹዎች አድሬስ ለማድረግ እንመጣለን። ተባረኩ። ወንድማችን ብሩክ በዝማሬ ያገለግልከን፣ ዶክተር ጥበበ፣ ፓስተር ነብይ እግዚአብሔር አብዝቶ ይባርካችሁ። በጣም ከተወደደ ጊዜያችሁን የሰጣችሁን እንዲሁም ቅዱሳን ዛሬ በጣም ጥሩ ተርናውት ነው የነበረው። ኦልሞስት እስከ 90 ሰው ገብቶ ነው አቴንድ ያደርግ የነበረው። ትልቅ ነገር ነው። እንቀጥላለን በዚህ። እግዚአብሔር ይባርካችሁ። ዶክተር ጥበበ መጽሐፉ እንዴት መገኘት እንደሚችል ምናልባት ሳትወጣ በዚህ ቻት ሩም ላይ አድራሻውን ብትጽፈው ጥሩ ነው። ሌላው የዚህን የዛሬውን ፕሮግራም ቅጂ በኢኢሲኤፍ የሶሻል ሚዲያ በፌስቡክ እና በዩቲዩብ ላይ በፖስት ፕሮዳክሽን እዛ ላይ ይወጣል፣ መከታተል ትችላላችሁ። ላልነበሩም ሰዎች እንደሱ በማድረግ መተባበር ትችላላችሁ። እግዚአብሔር ይባርካችሁ። የመጨረሻውን ጸሎትና ቡራኬ የኢኢሲኤፍ የቦርድ ቸርማን የሆነውን ፓስተር ኃይሉን እሱ እንዲጸልይልንና አገልጋዮችን እንዲባርክልን ኢንቫይት አደርጋለሁ። ፓስተር አንሚዩት አድርግና
እግዚአብሔር አምላክን ስለነበረን ጊዜ እጅግ አድርገን እናመሰግናለን። I would like to express my deep gratitude to Dr. Tibebe Shete and Pastor Nabiye Luul Kalile. You did a wonderful job. Thank you so much for taking time to talk from the bottom of your heart. And we are thankful and grateful to the Lord who gave us you people. We've received lots of gifts from the Lord, and gift of people is so wonderful. And we're happy to have you among us. God bless you and bless you richly. And having said that, I will pray in the heavenly language, which everybody loves. Let's pray. የተከበርክና የተፈራህ ሕያው አምላካችን እግዚአብሔር ሆይ እጅግ አድርገን እናመሰግናለን ዛሬ ስለነበረን የተዋበ ጊዜ። ወጣቶቻችንም አብረውን እንዲካፈሉ ስለረዳሃቸው፣ የልባቸውን እንዲያካፍሉ ስላገዝካቸው ወንድማችን ዶክተር ጥበበና ወንድማችን ፓስተር ነብየ ልዑል በልባቸው ያለውን እውነት ለሁላችን እንዲያካፍሉ ስላገዝካቸው ተመስገን። እኛም በጸጥታ ይህንን ጊዜ ካንተ ጋር እንድናሳልፍ እድሉን ስለሰጠህን ተመስገን። ይኸው ይተላለፍ የነበረው መልካም ነገር በውስጣችን የሁላችንን ጉጉት ያሳየ ስለነበር እናከብረሃለን። ልናቆመው ተገደድን እንጂ አላለቀም። ከፊት ለፊት ባሉት ጊዜያቶችም አምላካችን እግዚአብሔር ሆይ ወቅታዊ በሆኑ ጉዳዮቻችን እንዲህ መተናነጽ እንንችል እንድትረዳን ደግሞም አገራችንን ሁሉ ጊዜ በርቀት ያሰብናትን እንድታግዛት አሁን ከምታልፍበት የሐሳብ ልዩነት የወንድማማቾች ጠብ አቤቱ መፍትሄ እንድታበጅላት ዛሬም በድጋሚ እናስታውሳታለን እዚህም ባለንበት ቦታ ያንዳንዳችን ፈቃድህን አገልግለን እንድናልፍ ለያንዳንዳችን ጥበብና ጸጋ አትረፍርፈህ እንድትሰጠን እንለምንሃለን ስለነበረን መልካም ጊዜ ተመስገን ዛሬም ይህንን ውብ ፕሮግራም ስላሰናዱልን ደግሞ ወንድሞቻችን የፓስተራል ኮሚሽን አስተባባሪዎች እንባርካለን አቤቱ ለወንድሞቻችን ጨምረህ ብርሃን ስጣቸው ሁላችንም እንታነጽበትን ይህንን በጎ ነገር በጊዜው ያሰናዱ በብዙ መስዋዕትነት ሊያንጹን ስለተጉ ጌታ ሆይ በጎነት አድርግላቸው እጅህን ዘርጋላቸው እጅህን በሚፈልጉበት ጉዳይ ተገኝላቸው ብርሃንህን ጨምረህ አትረፍርፈህ አፍስስላቸው ከዚህም በኋላ በውሏችን ከያንዳንዳችን ጋር ሁን ስለሰማህን ዘወትርም ደግሞ ስለምትሰማን ተመስገን በኢየሱስ ክርስቶስ በጌታችን ስም
አሜን
አሜን እግዚአብሔር ይባርካችሁ
አሜን
ጌታ ይባርካችሁ ሁላችሁንም
ተባረኩልን እግዚአብሔር ይባርካችሁ እንደገና በቅርብ እናያችኋለን ብለን ተስፋ እናደርጋለን